Hi, OCBC. Hope your week is off to a good start. We come now to the passage in Acts that is probably the most famous passage in the book and one of the most famous in the New Testament, Acts chapter 2, 1 through 13, what we typically call Pentecost. And I want to start with this notion that Willie Jennings has that this passage, he says, is the epicenter of revolution. This is the story of the Spirit's outpouring on the early Jesus movement. And I want to note a few things with you about this passage that I think are especially important for us in this time. One is that this passage illustrates the Spirit's movement in the early church as a movement that was entirely the Spirit's doing. No human actors bring this movement about. And I think this is a particularly hard lesson for probably anyone to learn, but certainly for those of us in a place like Cambridge that are used to being very capable, very in charge, very used to bringing about the things that happen in our lives. But in this particular passage, there is no human actor that brings about what takes place on the day of Pentecost. It is entirely a movement of the Spirit. And I also want to note with you the way in which in this passage and with most theophanies, the appearance of the divine to humanity in the Bible, we have a very difficult time describing the movement of the divine outside of our appeals to nature. I mean, look at this text when it talks about the outpouring of the Spirit onto this early Jesus movement. It says, "And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind. And it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them." Wind and fire, these ancient symbols of theophany, which are symbols of nature's power and movement. I think that's very significant for a congregation that is continually focusing and reshaping and reimagining and repracticing our relationship to the more than human. To note that we have a very difficult time even comprehending or apprehending the movement of the divine among us outside of how we see nature's movement as an animation of divine Spirit among us. And then this last thing I want to note is that this opening sentence here, "They were all together in one place." Now that takes on particular meaning in this time that we're living through as we are quarantining ourselves in relation to this global pandemic. It's hard to read that and know that we cannot be together physically in one place. But I do want to imagine with you what it means for us in this time when we can't be together in one place to still be together in cyberspace, which is a particular kind of space that we are experiencing really a renewed type of togetherness as we join together in worship via live stream and in Zoom calls and all sorts of ways in which we are drawing together even as we cannot be physically located in the same room. And I wonder how this form of waiting, mirroring the early waiting of the disciples all together in one place, how this form of waiting togetherness that we are experiencing right now might renew our imaginations and our hearts and spirits for how the Spirit is moving among us now, differently perhaps than before, and our imagination for what kind of revolution of the Spirit there is to come. I hope that you are really digging into these daily readings in Acts, and I look forward to hearing some of your reflections about today's reading in the days to come. Take care.